The southern highway curved quietly through rows of pine trees, washed in late afternoon light, and for a moment the drive felt like it should have been peaceful. A rare pause after years spent in places where calm was a lie, yet that sense of ease never arrived because her instincts caught what comfort missed. In the rearview mirror, a patrol car lingered too long to be coincidence. Then another appeared farther back, both maintaining careful spacing that felt deliberate rather than random. She kept her speed steady, posture relaxed, hands light on the wheel, presenting the image of an ordinary driver while her mind shifted into assessment, tracking their movements, noting how they adjusted whenever another vehicle passed, always returning to position. When the road narrowed, the pattern broke into action, the lead cruiser surging forward while the second closed in behind, boxing her in with practiced efficiency, and moments later the lead car braked hard, forcing her onto the gravel shoulder as dust rose around the tires. The lights ignited instantly, red and blue flashing not as warning, but as intimidation. And she shut off the engine, lowered the window slightly, and waited, breathing slow, hands visible. Boots approached from both sides with confidence that felt rehearsed. The first officer leaned into her window without introduction, his eyes scanning her with open suspicion, his first words questioning how someone like her could afford a vehicle like this, where she'd gotten it, whether it was really hers. She answered calmly, stating she had identification and registration, that she would comply, even as she noted the second officer crowding her door, standing too close, one hand hovering near his belt with anticipation rather than caution. The response was a mocking laugh and a sharp command to get out. And before she could move deliberately, the door was yanked open, metal groaning as she was pulled out and shoved against the SUV, the impact stealing her breath. She didn't resist, stating only that the force was unnecessary. But her words were ignored, replaced by rough hands conducting a search that was anything but professional, lingering under the excuse of procedure, accompanied by quiet insults meant to humiliate rather than instruct. A third set of footsteps joined them, tightening the circle, and she catalogued angles and distances as the lead officer's breathing quickened, excitement creeping into his voice. The taser came out, crackling loudly in the still air, pressed close enough for her to feel its vibration as he gripped her chin and ordered her not to look away, telling her who controlled this road, who decided what happened next. In that instant, the situation clarified completely, any illusion of a lawful stop burning away, because violence was no longer a possibility, but an intention. Her body settled into calm as training took over, eyes catching the slight shift in his stance as he prepared to strike. When his fist came up, her response came first, sharp and controlled, her elbow driving back into his center, breaking his grip and folding him forward. She pivoted, using his momentum to slam him into the vehicle as the second officer lunged in shock, only to be swept off his feet and sent crashing to the gravel. Silence fell heavy and sudden, witnesses frozen as the third officer hesitated, fear flashing across his face as he realized the target they'd chosen was standing upright and steady, not fleeing, not pleading. In seconds, the power had shifted, and the roadside routine they had planned unraveled into something they had never expected. The silence that followed was brief and brittle, shattered by shouted commands and the hurried crackle of radios as the officers scrambled to regain control, their confidence leaking away with every second she remained standing, calm and unmoved. Backup arrived fast, tires screaming as more cruisers flooded the shoulder, weapons drawn not out of necessity but fear, and she raised her hands without protest, making no attempt to run, knowing flight would only feed the narrative they were already constructing. She was forced to the ground, cuffs biting into her wrists with unnecessary force, accusations spilling over her as if repetition could make them true, while bystanders stood frozen with phones raised, capturing fragments of truth that would soon be denied. At the station, the night stretched long and deliberate, every step slowed to remind her she was no longer a person, but a problem to be managed. Fingerprints taken twice, questions asked not to gather facts, but to provoke reaction, officers avoiding her eyes or watching her with open hostility. Charges multiplied with absurd speed, assault, resisting, intent, each one heavier than the last, and somewhere between the concrete walls and humming lights, she understood this was never about what she'd done, but about what she represented. A threat to a system that relied on silence and submission. Hours later, an attorney arrived, sharp-eyed and unafraid, recognizing patterns where others saw chaos, pointing out missing footage, mismatched timelines, the eagerness with which reports had been written before statements were taken. By morning, the story had already escaped the building, twisted into headlines that painted her as unstable, dangerous, a trained aggressor who had snapped, and as she stepped back into daylight under the gaze of cameras and whispered judgment, she knew the real fight was only beginning, not on the roadside or the jail floor, but in a system determined to protect itself at any cost. The days that followed were louder than the violence itself, marked by patrol cars lingering too long outside her home, anonymous tips leaked to eager reporters, and a steady drip of intimidation meant to remind her she was being watched. But pressure had never been foreign to her, and fear had long since lost its power. Evidence surfaced despite attempts to bury it, witness statements, audio fragments, patterns of behavior too consistent to ignore. And when federal investigators stepped in, the walls that had seemed immovable began to crack. Officers turned on each other, reports unraveled, and the same confidence that had fueled the stop dissolved into quiet panic as accountability finally loomed. In a courtroom weeks later, the truth arrived not with drama but with weight. Recordings played aloud, language exposed, intent laid bare, and the charges against her fell away one by one, replaced by new ones aimed in the opposite direction. As rulings were read and cameras flashed, she stood the same way she had on the roadside, composed, unyielding, refusing to celebrate what should never have happened in the first place. Outside, the road stretched on, unchanged, indifferent to the lives it carried, but its meaning had shifted, no longer owned by fear or authority misused, but reclaimed by someone who had refused to be broken by it. She drove away without escort, without applause, carrying no illusion that the system was suddenly healed, only the certainty that it could be challenged, and that sometimes the quietest resistance began with standing still, refusing to look away, and striking only when there was no other choice.